Hi, and welcome to Faith Talks, a program that discusses issues relating to God, faith, and life today. In today's program, we'll be exploring the topic of women and faith. Is there such a thing as the female faith? Is there such a thing as women and faith? Well, in the studio with me today, discussing those issues is Sharon Platt-McDonald, who is the women's ministry leader for the Adventist Church for the British Isles, and Eileen Becejac, who is a local women's ministry leader, a local leader in a church, particularly looking after women in the church. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to start with you, Sharon, because when most of us go to a church today, the pews are filled with women. What do you think it is about the Christian church that attracts women to faith?
Well, if you look at the ministry of Jesus, he met people where they were. He saw their presenting needs, their felt needs, and those were the needs that he picked up on. Yes, he did his ministry in the sanctuary and he spoke in the synagogue and so forth. But the issues that really matter, the life hurts, the healing, the emotional issues, he saw people's need and he was moved with compassion to act on that. And I think the heart of Jesus, the reaching heart, the comforting heart, the heart who understands our emotions, what that means in our daily lives, our life challenges, someone who meets that need. I think women are individuals who sees needs and want to do something about it. And I think that heart of Jesus that reaches out to those who suffer and touches them where they hurt is something that draws women in. And the saving grace of our Lord is about changing us from the inside out. We meet Christ, our hearts and lives are strengthened because of him. And from that position, we then look out for the needs of others to draw them into that compassionate embrace of Jesus.
And what about you? Why do you think there's so many women in church compared to men?
I think, sorry, I just had to think about it. But the reason there are many women in church is maybe there's something about, which Sharon mentioned, about the compassionate side of Jesus, and there's something that resonates in women about seeing the needs of other people. And being drawn to Jesus and his compassion is maybe why there are many women in church these days.
And I mean, as we're talking about, you are leading a national team of women trying to, implement women's programs across the Isles, and you're leading a local group of women trying to implement programs for them. But if the majority of people in church are women, is there really a need for specific programs that are only for women? What do you think, Sharon?
Yeah, I think if you think about church life, it's vibrant, well, it's supposed to be, but it can be quite structured. And when we go to church, it's a sort of vertical relationship. We go to praise God, we go to connect with God. Not to say that we don't have fellowship with each other, but church is a more structured environment. There's a purpose, there's order, there's precision. When we have women's ministry groups, we take away some of that structure. And so there's a vulnerability and a sense of connectivity where you can strip off all the formalities of a church service, so to speak, and connect with women at ground level with the issues that really resonates with them. So, for instance, in a church service, you may not discuss something like how you feel about aging or the menopause or relationship issues with your family or your husband or your children. But in a women's ministry group, you can be really real. This is how it makes me feel. These are some of my struggles. What's happening to you? You can't really do that in the middle of a church service. So that platform where you can feel at ease with women and connect on a real level and not feeling that you have to perform. Do you see what I mean? Because sometimes in church, you go to church and there's a way to behave, and you go to work, there's a way to behave. But when you're in a women's ministry group and a women's ministry function, you're just you. And I love that about it.
What about you, Eileen?
I completely agree with that, because instead of calling, in my church, instead of calling ourselves women's ministries, we actually called ourselves the New Bold Sisterhood.
Oh, lovely.
And it's about connecting with each other. We actually talk about leaning in, connecting and flourishing, growing together with each other. And I think you're right, in a large church setting, it's hard to connect on an emotional and authentic level. And sometimes in church, you might just have the time to say hi and then walk past, and you never really know how the other person is feeling. And I think connecting in events, but more importantly in small groups, is something which has really been helpful for getting the women of the church together, but also looking to connect out and reach out into the larger church community. And there's a place for women's groups, but as well as men's groups and children's groups. Everyone should have a place for them in church. So
that's lovely, isn't it? I love the way you talked about the connecting and the flourishing, because the caption for these 5-year terms that I'm doing for the women's ministry is reaching women, restoring lives and reflecting Christ. By reaching women, it's about not constructing programs that you think will happen or would be of influence to them or effective for them, but really reaching the heart of women. And a lot of what we do sometimes in church may not be really reaching, and by that I mean touching the heart, being effective in its outreach. And so reaching women, connecting with them, when we do that, we can enable them to restore their lives. We can look at building blocks too, because all of us are broken in different places in a way. And when we reach the needs, we can then restore lives. And when we're restored, we can really reflect Christ, because that's about a whole change, restoration. So I love that connectivity and flourishing. I think it really resonates with the theme of what we're trying to do on a national level.
Can you give me some examples? How has that kind of manifested itself in your local church? How do the women lean in towards each other?
Well, initially, we started out trying to organize a gathering of women where we would have women come in to listen to stories of women's lives and how their lives had been impacted through Jesus. But actually, we found out that this small group of women, there were about 10 women who got together to arrange this gathering. The group meeting every week to plan this gathering was just as important as the event itself. And we realized in the journey that having small groups of women relating to each other, rather than having a large gathering, was actually the lesson that we got. We continue to have a gathering every year for women, which is important. So I think it's important to have different number of events, but the small groups of women connecting to each other, that's when things start to happen, and you get amazed to see how people grow and from being restored and reaching out to others. So.
And you talk about the restoration that is needed among women. Can you tell me a little bit about how have you seen that manifest itself across Britain?
Well, there have been so many experiences. When women feel safe in an environment that's created for them to be able to speak and speak unreservedly and not feel inhibited, and when there's confidentiality, which is a huge issue, they're able to be real. And so what we found is that women have been able to come with their hurts and their pain, some through divorce, loss of all kinds, it may be even a mastectomy, loss of a body limb or emotional breakdown or whatever the challenge is. We have seen where there's a quiet, safe, firm environment, where there's the sisterhood, where they feel they belong, they connect. When people feel a sense of connectivity and belonging, they can feel vulnerable enough, although they've already been made vulnerable by life circumstances that have broken them. They can almost dare to make themselves even more vulnerable by opening up and embracing another sister. Now, as women, we can connect because we always ask ourselves the question, what was it like for you? Or what would you have done? We like to know, yes, life may have torn us in different places, and sometimes people come in with, well, did you think of that? And why didn't you do this? But we always search and we always want to connect to say, well, what could I have done differently? Or how can I be helped? We always seek to be restored and to get some nourishment, some nurturing, some change. And so, yes, we look to our sisters to be able to do that for us. And in that quiet confidence, also the prayer that comes with that, we can actually face God. And in a sense, it really should, when we look at church, it should be, oh, you've got to go to God right away. Yes, we should go to God. But there needs to be something tangible. There needs to be a sister that you can touch and say, I feel like crying today. I feel like screaming today. And we understand that. And so I think I've seen women restored through Christ, through their personal prayer lives, through their Bible study, through prayer, but through real sisterhood, people who've come alongside and say, I can help. Because it's not every day you feel like sitting and praying about everything. There's sometimes when you're so broken, you can reach out to someone and say, pray for me.
And without any condemnation.
Yes.
Without any condemnation, and also acceptance.
That's right.
Once someone feels accepted, then that begins the journey of restoration, from what I've seen.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
But how do you're talking beautifully about women needing that faith contact, needing each other to kind of connect and grow in their own lives and in faith as well. But why is it that you're talking about they need a space on their own? Are women's voices not heard in the church, or what is that? There seems to be a disconnect between the structure that is organized worship and what you are describing as a restoration of the hurt that is needed among the women. Is there a disconnect, do you feel, Eileen?
I think there might have been a disconnect, very honestly speaking. I think there might have been a disconnect. And I think women these days, well, perhaps of my generation, are beginning to realize that their place is not to take over what's already there, but to also to partner up with what already is taking place. And just by having women realize that there is a space for them in this church will make sure that this disconnect will not continue.
Is that something that you are trying to support or nurture in your groups?
Yes, I think what I try and encourage in our groups is that they are of value to the groups they are in, they are of value to the church they are planted in, and there are people that women see each other, and we want to grow together in the church. There's going to be a place for them. And it's a generational thing as well. It's not just women of my generation. We look towards the women of the older generation, so my mother's age, to help us and to nurture us. And then it's our duty as well to nurture the other women coming behind us.
That's right. And I do think there's different spaces, because there's a space in the structure of the church where we should be visible, where we should be represented, because it's like parts of a puzzle. And so when we go to church, there should be women functioning alongside men and children, because we're all part of the whole. But then there's that other space which is more, it's not so time limited as in a structural church service. And so you do need that space where you can connect and be able to just say what's on our heart in a unstructured way. So yes, we need to be more visible, because we're part of a whole body and we all function well together. But there are times when we need to come apart and really deal with issues that resonate with us, so we can spend quality time unpacking that and being able to feel nurtured and built up in that special time.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit, Sharon, and saying, you are a leader for women's ministry in Britain for the Adventist Church. Where do you go to nurture your soul? Where do you go to fill up?
Well, that's a good question. And I start at home. I have sisters, and my sisters were very, very close, and we always talk about issues relating to women. So I've had a really good upbringing with my sisters, very close tightness. My mother, who I say epitomises the Proverbs 31 woman, I can always talk to her about anything. She's just so embracing. And my husband, actually, a really excellent supporter, is behind me with women ministries. He says, "What did you talk about today?" And I tell him, and he said, "That's interesting. As men, we do such and such." So he's a sounding board for me when I go back and I present women's ministries programs or discussion. I said, "Well, men usually say this. My husband thinks such and such," and they'll go back and say, "He's a wise man," or "Go and tell him such and such. This is how we really think." So that's really nice. So I have that family, but also women who are role models. You don't know that you're one of my role models.
No, that's scary.
A lot of challenging questions around women, how women function in leadership. We've had some very interesting talks, Kirsten, and I've learned a lot from that, so thank you.
Likewise. But Eileen, I also want to talk to you, because you mentioned a little bit about the cross-generation that you had, that, you can learn from the older to the younger. How does that work? Do you feel that church and faith is different for older women than for younger women?
Yes, I think so. I think it's about interpretation. I think I've learned so much from the older generation about how it is important to always go back to the Word, to understand things. It's so very easy to get all sort of happy-clappy about things and how much we love each other, but how we continue on in this life is by going back to the Word and seeing it from their eyes, but interpreting the Word, the Bible, with my reference points. That's been very useful to me. So.
Because I think often, you know, when we're doing groups, we're segregating ourselves in group, there is some wisdom and some joy that gets lost across generations.
Personal stories from people of different ages. It doesn't matter. Some people. Somebody might be old in age, but they might not have experienced a lot. I find that listening to other people's stories, whether they're young and old, depending on what they've been through, that's very important for us to know people's stories.
And I think it's how the stories are told as well, because when we were growing up, as youngsters, we didn't always like to hear parents or mothers saying, when I was a little girl, or in my days, it's sort of thing, oh, here we go, they're not connected with what's happening in the 21st century. But it's how the stories are told. And so, yes, there's the wisdom of hearing the older voice, but for them to caption that in the present.
Yes.
So these are the lessons from the past. This is how it relates to your present, and this is how it could impact your future. So how the story is told is also
absolutely.
And I think also you're saying, you know, people have different experiences across it, and how we need to lean in and learn from that to move forward. But it also brings me to a little bit of a point, because a lot of perception is that women's group and women's ministry and women's prayer group is for the old age people. It's all the white-haired old ladies get together, knit and nat, and just have a little gossip about the men and all life when they were young and beautiful. None of you are grey-haired yet. How do you
products?
Yes.
How do you actually? At your age, why are you so interested in women's ministry or in women's grouping when people's perception is it's for an older generation?
I disagree. It's for an older generation. I think it's so important for the younger generation to see the older women as role models for them, and to feel included in what is happening in their church and what's happening as the church extends into the wider community. If we're just looking internally or just getting together to pray for each other, that I don't think will work in the long run. It has to be something that where young people I try and include myself in that, actually, where all of us are looking to see what we can do. Because when Jesus saw a need, he went out and did something about it. And I want to be part of a community that does something about that. And it's not about just praying for somebody who's not coming to church anymore. I would like to encourage people coming together to pray for everything, the brokenness, the stories that are behind the brokenness. It's not about judging people. Yes. It's about the stories behind that, you know. So.
And that is, that's a biblical precept, that mentoring. Because Timothy talks about let the older women mentor the younger women, teach them how to be good wives.
Absolutely.
So that premise of mentoring role model is biblical. And I think in the way that you've described it, we can grow, we can nurture, and there's a place for that.
You're kind of hinting at something as well, Eileen, that you don't just get together and drink tea and have cake together, but that you want to do something and be active in the community. Can you explore a little bit about what do you mean by that? I
must admit that many of the events we run always have food included in them because it brings people to the events. But the underlying thought is to come together, get strengthened by each other, and then go out and do something and look away from our internal selves, but look into the community and how we can help. And not just in our Adventist community, but into the wider community.
Have you seen that practically living out, or is it more of a dream that you have that women will get involved in other things than themselves?
I've seen that happen. I would like to see more of it happen, but we've just started this community, the sisterhood, really for the last 18 to 24 months at the church where I'm based at. And what we've tried to do is when we're doing events, instead of one of the events, instead of just bringing food together and lunching together, it's been about what can we do locally. There's a food bank locally. So we've brought in tins of food, anything they might need to just extend it. It's run by another church, but we'll support this other church in what they need as a food bank. So every time we try and do an event, we try and turn things around. For example, the last event we had, which was a vision afternoon tea. So we explained we explained what our plans were for the rest of 2013, but then we also had a charity come, which is about sponsoring children in poverty. And so a charity came and explained what they did, and some women signed up to sponsor some children and to give these children an opportunity. So we're always trying to turn their ideas away, to turn the focus away from themselves or ourselves to others. That's our premise.
At the same time, you're also expressing there is a need for women to kind of also look after themselves and recognize their own needs as well. Is that something women tend to neglect in the church?
I think it is, because by nature, we're carers naturally, aren't we? The nurturing instinct. And very often we are looking out for the needs of others, so much so that we sort of sacrifice ourselves in the process. And at a recent event, I got a psychologist in to do a course called Self-Care. And as we sat there was a number of us as women. It was interesting when we had to draw the pie chart of how much of our time is directed towards others. And there was like a snippet or hardly anything measurable that we had time to reflect, time for ourselves, and you can lose yourself in that process. And so while we want to be magnanimous on one hand and generous and giving and looking out to others, I think there is some sense of self-preservation that comes in there where we need to know how to draw the line. And I haven't done that very well in the past.
I think there is a problem with that, because I think sometimes you could get people who just want to be distracted by doing good works, that they forget about the care they need to do for themselves. And it's easy to climb on board on this bandwagon on helping others, but also if you neglect yourself and your relationship with Jesus or and how you personally grow, then after a while you will get burnt out. So I think that's something we have to keep acknowledging as we go along as well.
It almost reminds me of the Martha-Mary issue. Martha was busy, she was always doing, and then Mary was at the other end of the spectrum, I feel, just listening. But I think there's a place for both, and we need to just know how to equate that and to get that equilibrium.
And I think that balance is really difficult for women, isn't it? You know, most women are trying to balance too many aspects of that pie chart that actually ends up being two pie charts, doesn't it? Yes. So how do you keep that balance and grow in your faith as a woman if you're busy doing good, if you're busy serving others, or as you were saying, you know, just doing things? How do you grow in your faith as a woman?
I think it's very much about prioritising. When I open my eyes in the morning, I realise I'm alive and God has sustained that, and so I'll give him that segment of my time. After that, it's work or it's family and so forth. When I get back home, there may be time for reflection. So what we do at home, we have our personal time of worship or our private devotion, personal devotion rather. Then we have times when, obviously, on a daily basis, we'd worship together. But that time of segmenting so you can grow in your faith is about checking in with where you are all the time. Yes, I'm doing this. Yes, I'm doing that. And saying, actually, I'm feeling really tired. Actually, I'm feeling a bit stressed. Actually, I'm almost close to burnout, and being able to stop and say it's okay to feel that. Because very often we feel as if we failed or if we're somewhat diminished if we feel we're not coping. And sometimes we get there. You know, the ends of the cord is frayed almost. Yeah. And it's about being real and saying, look, Lord, I'm really tired. But checking in with him, checking in with ourselves and being real and knowing when to say, come you yourself apart and rest a while, as Jesus said. We don't get those rest periods often enough, I don't think. But it's about being real with ourselves so that we can be beneficial to others.
I also experience that a lot of women will not give themselves that rest time and will not feel that they actually should explore faith for themselves. But if they follow just a corporate worship, if they serve everybody else, then everything is fine, and they end up just drifting away from that connection and that feminine heart that God has as well. I don't know, is that something you have experienced in your groups, Eileen?
Well, I would say it could be something that could happen. But what I'm trying to encourage is we're trying to encourage each other with our personal relationship with Jesus, but also we go out to external events where we get boosted up by good speakers, and I think the meeting in the groups to on a weekly basis really boosts us up, but also going to external places to listen to what new things are coming through, new interpretations of how we should be living our lives is always just useful for us. We've been going every year to a women's event as a sisterhood, and that's continued to grow, and we've made it our yearly thing because it's very important for us to regroup and refocus on where we are as a group, but also where we are personally in our journey.
But I also, I know that you meet on a weekly level, and how do all these busy women get together on a weekly level? How is that possible?
For me, it was going to be quite impossible to meet face-to-face on a weekly basis. So we've tried to think out of the box, and because I have a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old, we decided that we would meet weekly by Skype. And we meet every week regularly, 9 o'clock on a Thursday evening by Skype. It used to be, I tried to sort of cut it down from 9 to 9:45, but it can go on sometimes because the more we've gotten to know each other, people tend to unload and openly pray for each other, and that's a very lovely thing. But that's kind of something we look forward to at 9 o'clock every week.
So that is strengthening your small groups on a local level.
Yes.
And I have seen that how your groups have grown as they have multiplied.
Yes, we have.
So women are attracted to that model as well.
I think it's because once you've put the children to bed, or once you've come home from the gym or from work, then you've got this time, you know that you're going to be strengthened and connected, which is very good.
That's great.
What would your last word be to our viewers on women and faith? What would be your wisdom to take home today?
Well, there's a place for women in the body of Christ. We were saved by the sacrifice of Jesus on Calvary so that we could be restored as individuals. Through that restoration, we can reach out, see need in others and help to restore them. And I feel that as women, we've been gifted with the heart of Jesus to care, the compassionate action that we need to take both for others and for ourselves. And God has blessed us with that. I'm happy to be a woman.
And you, Eileen, what is your last wisdom nugget for our viewers today?
I would say just be prepared to be vulnerable and to find people that you can be open to in church. I used to be one of those people who used to just slink back the back of church and think I've got other friends outside. But since opening my heart to other people in the church, especially women, and being able to relate to them on an authentic level, that's changed how I've approached church. It's changed how then I've approached everything else in life. So
I want to say thank you to both of you for joining us in the studio today and for sharing your wisdom on this topic. And I want to say thank you to you for watching us. If you want to join in the discussion, why don't you email us or join us on Facebook? Thank you for watching.